All right, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Big day, the Voice of College Football show. Appreciate you being here. And this is the spot to be. We're going to talk it up for the next couple hours. And of course, we're going to take in the final rankings. They didn't mean anything a week ago. They didn't mean anything 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago, only to set up what we're going to watch today. And of course, the committee doesn't even necessarily set us up for that because they can decide what they want to decide when the time comes. And the time has come. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. It's Christmas time. Please use the Amazon link when you do your shopping. Use the Amazon link that we provide. It is the same shopping experience, doesn't cost you a penny, and you help us grow and build the channel. All right, I jumped on a few minutes early, and I'm keeping track of the broadcast right now, as I believe ESPN is going to show this on the main network after Sunday NFL Countdown. So keep me honest on that. In the meantime, we're going to go through your comments that have come in. And I went through the various videos and live streams from last night and yesterday, and we've had over 500 comments come in about the selection of SMU versus Alabama versus South Carolina, Ole Miss. You could make a case for all sorts of teams. And there are a couple teams that will make the college football playoff field that people are questioning, and they have some valid points. I don't think that they have a full argument top to bottom against the likes of, let's say, Texas or Indiana, but they have some points there for sure. When it comes down to it, there are only so many quality wins to spread around. There are only so many teams that have quality wins. There aren't that many quality wins when raised to a certain standard. And the standard that most of you have is you want to see wins against Ohio State and against Miami and against Texas and Georgia and those type of teams. And there just aren't that many wins of that caliber. So if we're looking at quality wins, check out the video that we posted late last night, Alabama versus SMU. And I also threw in a wild card team that will definitely make the college football playoff, but their resume needs to be called into question as well. So thanks for being here. The call-in line is in the chat. Tiger Paw Craven, good to see you here. The call-in line is in the chat as I'm reading all these various comments. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What's up? What's up? What's up to everyone? Crying Belly and Martin and Dave and Alan, and I see you all. Good to have you here. But I want to get to some of these comments that have come in overnight before we get to the actual rankings, because, of course, these comments are going to be null and void in just a few minutes. But for right now, they're pretty interesting because people have good points. They've got not so good points. So here we have comments coming in. So hopefully you can see those. Sneaky Quick says, wins versus top 25 teams last week. Alabama 3-1, SMU 0-1. This week, Alabama 3-1, SMU 0-2. Ranked wins, are they valid? Well, of course, they're valid to a certain extent because the best teams in the country are ranked. However, once we get to the 15 range, there could be all sorts of teams that could be ranked or are not ranked. And you'll notice in my videos, I never go by ranked wins because, number one, I don't trust the rankings, whether those are the AP rankings or the College Football Playoff Committee rankings. I don't trust them. I don't trust their judgment. I think that there are teams 25 to 40 that are just as good as the bottom 5 to 10 teams in the rankings, generally. Not that they're exactly as good, but they're so close within the range. Why should we just count ranked wins? I rank quality wins. All right, we've got Jim Wood at 51-12. I guess SMU is a top 12 team, even though they can't beat a top 20 team or any ranked team when they play them this year. Makes perfect sense to me. So some people making the argument that Alabama has quality wins and SMU does not. Other people making the argument that SMU does not lose to bad teams and Alabama does. Mike Johnson says it's not just about wins the committee looks at, it's also body of work, schedule, beating ranked teams, etc. Dark side, 12-team playoff, and there are still debates. In my opinion, strength of schedule has to play into it. SMU had, I believe, the 75th. It's up to number 60, actually. So the strength of schedule right now, according to what I checked last night after the games were played on Saturday, Bama, number 16. And then we've got SMU at 60. And if you want to throw in Indiana, even though there is no chance that they're not going to make the playoff, I made a comparison there. Indiana's at 68. So let's look at the strength of schedule. And of course, we can make all sorts of criticisms of the strength of schedule as well. So this is where it stands right now. Is there a strength of schedule on there? No, that's the FPI. I don't want that. I want strength of schedule. Here we go. So if we're going to look at strength of schedule, this is what we've got. So that's strength of record. Strength of schedule. Strength of schedule. Georgia's number one. They played Texas twice. They played Alabama. All right, Georgia is at number one. They play Georgia Tech. All right, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Oklahoma. In terms of the teams that are fighting for the college football playoff, the first team that shows up is Alabama at 16 strength of schedule. Of course, they played Georgia, LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, Wisconsin, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Tennessee. That's the Alabama resume. You can't deny the schedule. You can push back on the losses, no doubt about that, and the performance in one loss in particular, but not the schedule. Alabama's at 16. The next team called into question at times is Texas, and Texas is in the playoff. There's no question about that. And people have ripped on Texas as not defeating any ranked teams. Texas has a win against 8-4 Texas A&M. Texas A&M should be ranked. They're an 8-4 team with an extremely strong schedule themselves and strong resume. So Texas beat Texas A&M. They're 8-4. They've got 2 wins against Florida and against Michigan, 2 7-5 teams. And then they've got a run of wins against 6-6 teams. You may not consider those to be quality wins. I do to a certain extent. They're decent wins. And Texas dominated most of those games against those 6-6 teams. Teams like Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and the like. The next team that comes into question here, nobody talks about Missouri. Missouri, just like South Carolina, Alabama, and Ole Miss, is 9-3. But of course, they got blown out by Texas A&M and Bama. I am not promoting Missouri as a college football playoff contender. I'm just noting that they have a fairly similar schedule to some of the contenders, and they also went 9-3, and their schedule rank is 28th. So it's not that low. All right. Nobody talks about Illinois, or very few people talk about Illinois. I've seen a couple comments come in about Illinois at 9-3. Now, of course, they lost to Penn State and Oregon. Had Illinois played Indiana's schedule, we might be talking about Illinois playing in the college football playoff instead of Indiana. Illinois 9-3 lost to Minnesota, a 7-5 team. Otherwise, they lost to Oregon and Penn State. They were competitive against Penn State. They were down a touchdown with 4 minutes left. Their schedule rank is 32. Did Illinois beat anyone? No, they did not beat anyone that's any good. I can't think of one Illinois win. Can we think of anyone that they beat that's any good in the Big Ten? They beat Michigan 7-5. Okay, that's their best win, right? Nebraska 6-6. Yeah, so there's nothing there for Illinois. All right, there's Clemson. They won the ACC. It does not matter. They're sitting pretty. They don't have to be compared to anyone because they got a kicker who hit a 56-yarder to walk off the ACC championship game. Next in line, BYU. Interesting case here. They're not going to the college football playoff, no, but this is more here at the Voice of College Football. We don't just go with what's been served to us, given to us. We explore other options. We are for the smart fan. That's why all of you are here. So we explore other teams that may have a gripe, may have an argument. BYU is number 42 in the country in strength of schedule. They're 10-2, so they've got a better record than Bama, of course, Ole Miss and South Carolina. They beat SMU. BYU beat SMU. That's a huge statement right there. Their two losses, they lost Arizona State by 5. Arizona State looked pretty good on Saturday in winning the Big 12 at 11-2, and BYU lost to them by 5. Their one drawback for BYU would be that they lost to Kansas. And also consider that outside of defeating SMU and Kansas State, and I'm doing all of this off the top of my head, I cannot think of anybody else that BYU has defeated that's got a winning record. I don't believe that there's anybody else, just Kansas State and SMU. All right, next in line, vying for a college football playoff berth would be Miami. Okay, Miami is the 55th rated strength of schedule. Miami's got 2 losses against Georgia Tech, 7-5, and Syracuse, 9-3. Now, most of us don't believe Syracuse to be a really legit 9-3 team, but 9-3 nonetheless. And Miami lost both of those games extremely close. Now, Miami's also got a run of very fortunate wins, we will say, against marginal teams like 6-6 Virginia Tech, 6-6 Cal. Miami's best win, probably Florida, 7-5. Oh, they beat Louisville, 8-4. Those would be the big wins for Miami. 9-3 Duke. Okay, they got 3 wins against teams with winning records. Louisville, Duke, and Florida. So that's the Miami resume right there. Some people actually called Notre Dame into question. I'm going to bypass Iowa State. Of course, they lost their 3rd game in the Big 12 championship game, and they've lost to a losing team, and they are just not quite there. Notre Dame's strength of schedule is 58th. They've got the worst loss of any team in the top 25. By far, it's not even close. Notre Dame, other than that, has had game control and dominance over most of its opponents. Really good win against Texas A&M, 8-4. But other than that, who are the teams that Notre Dame has defeated that have winning records? Texas A&M, 8-4. Army and Navy. Those are 2 of Notre Dame's best wins. For Notre Dame, it's more about they've played consistently. They haven't lost multiple games, and they have a lot of game control and dominance against a lot of mediocre competition. And we see it reflected there with the 58th rated schedule. Notre Dame's strength of schedule is only 2 spots above SMU, and they catch all sorts of grief. Well, SMU, yeah, strength of schedule at 60. They don't have any monumental wins. But again, few of these teams do have monumental wins. Their best wins, Duke 9-3, Louisville 8-4, and they beat a bunch of 7-5 teams like Pitt, Boston College, and there's somebody else in there that I'm missing off the top of my head. There's like another 7-5 team in the ACC that they beat. Pitt, Boston College, somebody else again. It's Duke 9-3. It's Louisville at 8-4. SMU doesn't have any bad losses. They lost to Clemson on the last play of the game, 56-yard field goal, ACC championship game, and Clemson's going to the playoffs at 10-3. They lost to BYU. So SMU has a strong case. They just really do have a strong case. Besides, they have not. They did not defeat the two best teams on their schedule. They didn't get it done against those two, but they didn't get blasted. They didn't even get controlled in the fourth quarter. They didn't even take a tie game and give up 2 touchdowns in the final 5 minutes. They took it down to the last play of the game. Arizona State's in. And then I'd like to get to Indiana. Indiana's strength of schedule sits at 68. And it seems ridiculous that a Big Ten team that's 11-1 would be left out of the playoffs, and they won't be. But let's just consider this. Indiana's best win is Michigan. Michigan 7-5. Did they bully Michigan? Did they beat them down? No, they beat them 20-15. They had 18 yards of offense in the second half. Yes, they had game control. They were dominant against all these other teams for the most part. But man, there has never been, and I challenge you to bring something to the forefront, never been a worse 11-1 resume in the history of college football, major power conference college football, than Indiana. 7-5 Michigan, best win by 5 points. 2 6-6 wins, Washington and Nebraska. Their other 8 wins were against teams with losing records. Bad football teams. They had one time to shine. They lost to Ohio State by 23. Did they get annihilated? No. Did they take them to a 4-quarter game? No. It was something in between. They got controlled, dominated. They were clearly not in Ohio State's class on that day. So that's pretty much what it comes down to right there. Some interesting comparisons to consider. All right, the guys are on the air, Reese Davis and company, and we will see how long it takes for them to start to unveil the top 25. But in the meantime, we can take your calls, but just keep in mind that if I put you on a call and then they start to get down to the nitty gritty and get into these rankings, then we will go directly to them and read off the rankings all together. DeReal MVP, thank you so much for encouraging everyone to hit the like button. I know that you get in here, you get excited, you just want to talk college football and look at these rankings and debate me and debate people in the chat, but please hit the like button. It means a lot to the YouTube algorithm. The more likes there are, the more opportunity for this to get pushed out into the YouTube traffic. All right, let's take some calls. But again, I reserve the right to cut you off immediately if we're going to the rankings. Michael, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing yourself.
I am doing just fine.
I hope you're having a great day. What was a great day in football yesterday?
Yeah, a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta ask you this though. Everybody's was shocked with the world and stuff like that with Arizona State. But is it me or am I the only one that really thought Arizona State, even though they go back and forth at first, was actually had more game control than Iowa State did? The way he was dominating fast.
I don't quite understand the question. Arizona State won 45-19. They blew out Iowa State.
No, I get
Are you
that.
the only one who thought that they had game control?
Yeah, even though they was going back and forth at first, but when they got that first stop on Iowa State, I think it was in midfield goal or they hold them on downs or something early in the game.
Arizona State
they were going back and forth scoring first.
Yeah, they went back and forth. It was 7-0. It was 7-3. It was 10-7. Okay, it was 10-10.
Excuse me, but if I'm not mistaken, did Iowa State miss a field goal on their third possession or something?
Yes.
Okay, from that point on, in my opinion, that's when I think Arizona State took over. Is that what you thinking too?
Well, I didn't have to think too much about it. They scored 35 straight points. So, yes, that is clearly when Arizona State took over the game.
Yeah, but I mean, that was in the second quarter. Did they do most of the damage in the third quarter, though?
They led, I think, 17-10 at half. Then they scored,
Like,
3 consecutive touchdowns? I don't know what we're talking about here.
no, what I'm asking, Mark.
We're waiting for the college football playoff rankings to be unveiled. Let's not argue about how much game control Arizona State had over Iowa State. Arizona State's a complete non-factor here, except for where they get seeded. They're in the playoff. They won the Big 12 championship.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, but I wasn't trying to get you mad. That was what I was wanting to ask you last night, but you cut everybody off. That's what I was asking. So, all right. Well, anyway, I will try to get back on later today and stuff like that. If not, I'll catch you later this weekend.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you being here. All right, let's keep it rolling here. And again, I don't know when they're going to start this deal, but probably in the next 10 minutes or so. Mooley, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. I'm watching the selection show. Really, really weird point that I saw Coach Saban make. He's saying that if strength of schedule is a determining factor, well, he said SMU shouldn't be penalized for losing in the conference game, but if it was such a factor, then maybe they shouldn't have been in the position to begin with, and maybe they should have been where they should have played their way into the playoffs. I thought that was interesting. He just said right now. I don't know. We've talked about strength of schedule and stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that, of course, the strength of schedule should be a huge factor. Anybody who says that strength of schedule shouldn't be a factor, then we just line up the records and those teams go to the playoff. That's all we would do. Then it just comes down to Oregon's 12-0, 13-0. They go first, and then we go through all the one-loss teams and we stack them up, and then they go, and then we go through the two-loss teams and we stack them up. And then I guess we flip a coin among the two-loss teams, because if you don't go by the strength of schedule, and the strength of schedule is just a reflection on obviously how difficult the schedule is, but then you can evaluate the wins and the losses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. But then also, there's also the thing about you can only play who's in front of you and stuff too. And maybe if these schedules were better, like, how do I say it? Because I know like the conference schedules, the conference gives you the schedules, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. But then also, like, for example, let's take like the out of conference schedules. Some of these like series are made a few years in advance. Like I believe like for Bama, their home to home series with Wisconsin was made like 5 years in advance too.
Yeah, just to comment to the guy that's writing in here, Whoa Nelly College Football Game, IU is in, why discuss them? Because we run a good show here. We go beyond the groupthink and what we are shoved down our throats, and we discuss anyone we believe that should be discussed. And I don't care if a team's number one ranked in the country. If I don't believe that their resume stacks up or that they're in question, then we're going to talk about them. So, yeah. Anyway, to get back to your question, yeah, the conference schedules are given to the teams, but we still have to evaluate the teams based on who they played. Like, it's not Indiana's fault that they played a bad schedule in the Big Ten, but we still have to evaluate them based on the teams that they played. And they played a lot of bad teams. So they dominated those teams for the most part, except Michigan. And they had a shot against Ohio State. They were given one game basically to show that they could play with a college football playoff team, and they couldn't. But the thing about Indiana for me is they generally did what they should. And there are certainly other college football playoff teams that lost by roughly 23 points to other college football playoff teams. So I don't want to damn them because they lost to Ohio State by 23. But they also had the opportunity to schedule out of conference. And your point is that when these teams schedule out of conference, They don't know how good these teams are going to be. Whether you're scheduling 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 50 years ago, you know that Charlotte, FIU, and Western Illinois suck. So they will always suck. They always have sucked. You know you're scheduling no one. So that's what Indiana did in non-conference is pathetic. That's the only way I can phrase it. It's incredibly pathetic for any team in power conference play, whether they've got hopes of going to a playoff or not, to schedule Charlotte, Western Illinois, and whoever in the hell FIU. Like, that is just, I expect Akron to schedule better than that, and they do. So like if Indiana got left out of the playoff, which they won't, and I'm not saying that they should, but if they did, if the committee, and it could be argued, if I was in that room and somebody paid me to argue against Indiana, it's easy to do. I would not bat an eye at them getting left out of the playoff because you need to schedule some teams out of conference. They didn't do that.
No, I get that. In defense of Indiana, though, I'll just say because no one expected them, not even them, to be this good this season. So I think it was more just.
What's that have to do with anything? Then if they didn't expect to be this good, then we should just take them off the board and say you're not a serious competitive football program, so you shouldn't be considered for the play. If that's what they truly think of themselves, and I understand that Indiana has been a doormat in college football, and therefore they go out and schedule Charlotte and FIU so that they can just make a bowl game because their mindset is we just want to go 3-6 in the Big Ten and win 3 non-conference games to get to a bowl game to make a little extra money. So that's their mindset. But if you're going to have a loser's mindset, then you should probably be penalized to a certain extent. Now, they're only being penalized by being knocked back to like number 10 in the country. And again, I am not proposing that Indiana should be left out of the playoff, but I do think it's a discussion because their resume is, there are teams that are ranked 15 spots lower than Indiana that have better resumes than Indiana, that have better wins than it. Well, there are teams that are number 50 in the country that have better wins than Indiana. Northern Illinois has a better win than Indiana does.
And that's fair.
It's just pathetic that we only have 12 teams making a playoff out of 135, and one of them, the best team that they can beat, is a 7-5 team. That's their resume. Like, we should have a better sport than that. We should have better scheduling than that, than to have a team say our credibility is based on beating one 7-5 team out of 11 wins. That's that.
Yeah.
Like, listen to that statement. They won 11 games and they beat one 7-5 team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their best win.
Yep. No, I hear you on that. And that's what I've been arguing with people about Indiana, because there's such a huge variance between the team that they lost to versus the team that they beat. How do you even begin to assess Indiana's true strength because of that big variance? For me, this is how I decide. I think the Michigan team that has been playing these last couple of weeks is different than the one that lost to Illinois and lost to Washington. I believe if they played on a neutral site field right now, Michigan would win. That's personally how I feel. I think they're more of a top 30. I'm not going to say they're a top 25, but because their offense is really suspect.
You believe Michigan would beat Indiana today?
No,
is that what you just said?
I'm not saying they would beat Indiana. I'm just saying that I think Michigan is better than where they were when they had Tuttle at quarterback.
Oh,
at
sure,
that part of this
they
year.
are. I'm not debating you. Even if you would have said you think that Michigan would beat Indiana today, I have no idea. I would not surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me too.
If
The way
somebody
they,
held a gun to my head, actually, I would think I would pick Michigan to beat Indiana. I
yeah,
wouldn't have a whole lot of confidence in it, but I think I would lean Michigan slightly.
I mean, in all honesty, I haven't seen a defense completely shut out an offense in a half this season. When what Michigan did to Indiana in that second half, too. So I agree with you on that statement.
And Michigan, even before the Ohio State game, just scored 50 points against Northwestern, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but Northwestern's not giving up 50 points against anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Davis Warren. They're not great, but he's good enough to at least get the offense rolling. Also, remember but against Oregon, they had a chance to get into one score, but then they did that really awful. They just kept switching out like Warren and Alex Orji when they were like right about to score. I don't know why they were doing that. They should have just kept Warren in there because the offense was flowing with him. But
Yep.
then they started doing that weird switch. Uh, they were competitive against Oregon as well. So, and that's also the thing because when we evaluate, because all I hear this week is Bama lost to two awful teams. Two awful teams. I think the Oklahoma loss is awful. Correct?
Yes.
But
Not because it's against Oklahoma, but because it was 24-3.
3. Correct. But the Vandy loss, everyone's acting like Vandy's an awful team. I don't think Vandy's like that good of a team, but this is a team that went ahead and played a top 10 strength of schedule. And yes, while most of the good teams besides Bama, they ended up losing, they were competitive in a decent amount near the end because they weren't that competitive against Tennessee and another team. But I don't think they're a bad team.
I don't think they're a bad team either. And not just to cut you off real quick, but if you look at it this way, Vandy's generally as good as anybody Indiana beat.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bama's one loss on a bad day, and they need to be held accountable for it, absolutely, and almost may miss the playoffs because of it. And I would have no issue if Bama misses the playoffs. I'm not going to be crying by any stretch. I think they're one of the 12 best teams, roughly one of the 12 best teams in the country, but I'm not going to be shedding a tear for Alabama because they had every opportunity. But yeah, that loss against Vandy is against a team that's as good as anybody that Indiana beat.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Generally.
I was going in a different direction. There's still people making waves that it's like sacrilegious apparently that Bama is above Miami. And then they say, well, Georgia Tech kept it close with Georgia. Georgia Tech's a good team. Let me just say, the Georgia Tech team that beat Miami, Haynes King was injured and couldn't throw the ball. They had under 100. I think they had 99 total. They had to bring Philo in when they wanted to make passing plays, right? They were basically just running
I
on
watched
Miami.
that whole game. Yeah, they played both quarterbacks, and Haynes King only threw a few passes, and they were just dump offs and screens. Yeah,
Right. This isn't the same team this wasn't the same guy who threw for 300 yards against Georgia. So I didn't mean to turn this into a rant thing, but the fact that Vandy is considered like a bad loss, but they're not going to take into account like the context behind the loss that Miami had against Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech's a very solid team. They, you know, they, with Haynes King getting injured, I don't think they would have lost to Virginia, perhaps. And I think they are a very capable team. I think at their best, they are they're like a noticeably better team than Vandy. It's just we're just looking at scores here. We're just looking based on feels and vibes based on it. And there's this, and also everyone just hates Bama and just wants to say, oh, well, Bama doesn't have any, it's sacrilegious. Bama doesn't have any argument. Once you lose to those teams, everything goes out the window. So
I also think that the committee generally wants to see how good a team can be.
mm-hmm.
And if the team at its best can compete in the playoffs, then they're a more legitimate team, which obviously Alabama can when they're on their game.
Yeah, and that's also what scares me about Bama is Bama on the road is a much different team than Bama at home, and also, well, right before I'll also mention right before they start doing these rankings, uh, Bama in terms of strength of record. If you look at the rankings last week, they basically followed the strength of record of that for ESPN. Bama's strength of record is 9 and SMU's is 15. So I I wouldn't I wouldn't be happy with it personally as a Bama fan. I don't think they should be penalized SMU because considering that they were in the playoffs beforehand. But I'm just throwing that out. Take that information what you want.
So while I slightly lean Alabama, once you put Alabama into this mix, it's difficult for me to separate them over Ole Miss. And of course, they beat South Carolina head to head. If they had not played South Carolina and the rest of their resume was what it was, and South Carolina's is what it is, I would say South Carolina has a better resume than Bama. Again, though, I can't get past the head to head, and I think that needs to be honored. Unfortunately, Ole Miss and Alabama didn't play. Ole Miss has looked like a better team start to finish to me than Alabama. Uh, nobody has made Ole Miss look foolish.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any horrible losses. They just don't have as many good wins as Bama. And SMU. Just going by what the committee is saying about SMU and this conference championship game, and they were number 8 going into the conference championship game. So I do not believe, based on the committee's own logic, that they should be knocked out of the playoff.
Right, like because
But it
then
looks like we're at it right now, Muley. So appreciate you calling, man.
right. Thank you, Mark.
You too. All right, let's run it down here. I was wondering how ESPN was going to set this up to not confuse some fringe college football fans concerning the rankings here. Did we not just see Oregon at 1 and Georgia? I missed that. Now we're on to a resume comparison of Boise State, Arizona State, and Clemson. I think that they were just putting in the obvious that Oregon's the 1 seed and maybe Georgia's the 2 seed. But in a comparison of Clemson, Arizona State, and Boise State, to determine again, the other portion of this argument is not just who's going to make the playoff at the back end, is of course who's going to receive these first round buys. So 2 out of 3 looking at Boise State, Arizona State, and Clemson. Okay, so we've got Oregon at the 1, Georgia at the 2. That was obvious. There's Boise State at 3, and that makes total sense because Boise State was number 10 in the country. They defeated number 20 in the country. A lot of people don't agree with this, and I get it. Did Arizona State play top to bottom a better schedule than Boise State? Yes, they did. Did Clemson play a better schedule than Boise State top to bottom? Yes, they did. Boise State, however, only lost 1 game. They didn't lose 2. They didn't lose 3. They lost 1 game, and they took Oregon to the final play of the game on the road. They also beat, again, this is kind of an odd year where the Mountain West Conference runner-up was a really good win in UNLV, as assessed by the committee, by the way, not necessarily me. All right, there we've got Arizona State at number 4, and that's another good call, obvious call. I would have had no issue with Arizona State at 3 and Boise State at 4, except the committee did not set it up that way going into the weekend. But overall, I would have been fine with Arizona State at 3. But going into the weekend, Boise State, based on winning by 2 touchdowns against the number 20 team in the country, earned the number 3 seed, according to the committee's own rankings. All right, so then we got Arizona State at 4. Now comes the real drama in regards to, obviously, the seeding of who gets that coveted 5 spot. And then also who is going to make it out of what is basically just going to be SMU and Alabama. We can talk about South Carolina and Ole Miss and BYU and Miami, but it's coming down to SMU and Alabama. And if Alabama does not make the playoff, they have nothing to complain about. Zero. Nothing. All right, there's Clemson at number 12. So this is such an odd situation that basically no one saw coming as of just a few weeks ago, because we saw Miami and we saw SMU high in the rankings. And at one point, we saw Clemson undefeated in the ACC. But as soon as they lost an ACC game to Louisville and really got dominated in that game, they plunged in the rankings. Then they lost to South Carolina. Well, Miami opened the door. Miami opened the door. And as Fran Brown, head coach of Syracuse, said coming off the field after the win against Miami, Coach Sweeney, you're welcome. So Clemson sneaks in at number 12, and of course they will play the 5 seed, and that will be Texas. Clemson at Texas. I do not believe we have ever seen these two heavyweights ever play. Clemson and Texas. Again, I do not believe that we have ever seen these two get together on a football field. Not that I can remember. And I pretty much remember any matchup post the mid-70s. So Texas is probably just kind of clapping and yawning and saying, okay, I think we're good with that. We're fine. There is nothing that I've seen this season that gives me much hope that Clemson's going to win this game. I know they got a Hall of Fame coach and they've got a lot of tradition and one of the great programs in college football over the last 10 to 12 years. But man, they're going to have to play their rear ends off. And they are going to have to play the game of their lives to win in Austin. All right, so we got the 5-12, and of course the winner of that is going to take on Arizona State. At the 6th position, we got Penn State. So Penn State, despite having a worse resume than Ohio State, gets the nod. And this shows that they were not penalized. Neither team was penalized in their conference championship games, nor in a sense should they be. In Texas's case, they played Georgia as close as you can humanly possibly play a team, in that they dominated the first half and they really outplayed Georgia, but they screwed up the game and lost in overtime. Penn State, on the other hand, was distanced by Oregon. It was a fun game. It was an exciting game. There was a lot of offense, but Penn State was never really within firing distance of Oregon. Okay, Notre Dame's at 7. I'm fine with that. I would actually put Texas 5, Ohio State. No, I would put Texas 5, Notre Dame 6, Ohio State 7, and Penn State 8 is how it should go, based on logic. So this isn't always logical, what this committee puts together. So I believe we are expecting, who am I missing? There's somebody else in the, no, Notre Dame's at 7. So we're now expecting Ohio State at 8 and Tennessee at 9, I believe. Yeah, so there's Ohio State. They're going to have a home game against Tennessee. And Ohio State's the 6th ranked team in the country. Clemson, we see, is the 16th ranked team in the country. So they only picked up one ranking spot in winning that championship game against SMU. So as we follow along with these rankings, the rankings, Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Notre Dame 5, Ohio State 6. And here comes Tennessee. And so it's Tennessee 9, Indiana 10, SMU 11. That's what I'm expecting to see. There's Tennessee going to Columbus. The last time Ohio State and Tennessee played would have been in the 1995 Citrus Bowl. Peyton Manning, Tennessee won 20-14. Clemson and Texas, yeah, I do not remember them ever playing a game. I'll have to go to Wikipedia on that one. Indiana, will they be playing in South Bend against Notre Dame? I know that Indiana's played Notre Dame in the last 15 or 20 years. I can't really nail down when and what happened. I'm sure they lost, but I do recall them scheduling a series against Notre Dame, not recently, but in the last 20 years, I believe. All right, let's get to it. Notre Dame at home. Come on, give us the 10. Is anybody in front of me in the chat? Maybe 5 to 10 seconds. There's Indiana going to Notre Dame. So the committee avoided, and this was not difficult, but they did avoid rematches or conference matchups in the first round. You know, there were all sorts of formats and models and projections that have come down in the last couple of weeks that had Tennessee against Georgia, Ohio State, Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana. So we avoided that. All right, this is the final spot, and there it goes. They're going to give you the big buildup here. Schedule strength goes to Bama 16 versus 60, but the strength of record is closer at 9 versus 15. Wins versus teams over 500. They're somewhat equal, 5-1 versus 5-2. But again, the SMU, Louisville, Duke, Pitt, TCU versus Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, Missouri. The wins aren't even close, but SMU is going to be selected, I believe. There is no way that they dropped from 8 to 12, losing on the last play of the ACC championship game. They just didn't. And in the real world, Bama's resume should have been boosted by the Georgia win against Texas, but the committee tells us that it was not. And we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and it's going to be SMU. There is no way that they dropped from 8 to 12. There it is. Alabama, ladies and gentlemen, has missed the 2024 college football playoff. And maybe some other teams that we thought might be there in the preseason, like Ole Miss, like Florida State, like Utah, are obviously not there as well. So there we go. SMU going to Penn State. I don't remember any matchups between those two schools. There was some overlap in 1982 when Penn State won the national championship with one loss, and SMU went 11-0-1 and won some certain oddball type of national championship rankings, but they finished number 2 that season. All right. The Brain Trust is getting together. Meanwhile, we'll take your calls now. Let's get to it. Since we know the field of 12, welcome into the Voice of College Football, the real MVP.
Wow, what a disappointing day for ESPN, Mark. I'm not sure if you saw my chat, but Brett McMurphy leaked that SMU was going to be in the playoffs before the announcement was made. So a complete disappointing day for ESPN. There was literally no drama at all for most people.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many people are following Brett McMurphy necessarily, but hardcore people are. I don't, but he's got his 150,000 people following him on Twitter. But of course, that once that gets out, sure, it goes all over the place. But it got out there how far in advance?
30. I put it in the chat like half an hour ago, I'd say.
Yeah.
Shortly after the show started. Like, I can find it out right now to be exact to give you a more accurate time frame, but
I'm not that caring of that. It doesn't matter to me. But in terms of who made the field, the committee gave us enough clues with talking about these championship games not being evaluated like the other games, and with Alabama's resume, along with everybody else who did not play, their resume being frozen. They would normally get a boost with Georgia now suddenly being the SEC champion with another top 3 win in the country. That should boost Alabama's resume. But according to the committee, they were freezing resumes, which is inane and stupid.
I completely agree. And now I've got to address all the haters, Mark, all the people saying SEC down bad, SEC trash, Mark. For this bracket, the goal is to win the national championship. SEC, Mark's got the golden ticket to the national championship game. We can put in pen, in my opinion, Georgia to the national championship game right now. Their bracket, their entire bracket consists of Boise State, Notre Dame, Indiana, Penn State, SMU.
So
Those teams, do you think can beat Georgia?
Okay. So again, Georgia's going to play who in the second round?
Winner of Indiana, Notre Dame.
Okay. They got Notre Dame, most likely. And then keep it going from there?
SMU plays Penn State, and then assuming Penn State wins, they play Boise State. So it'd probably be Penn State. Should get to the national championship game.
Yeah.
They avoid the 5 other best teams in the country. They avoid Oregon, Ohio State, Tennessee, and Texas. If you're a Georgia fan, I would already be booking my tickets to the national championship game.
Yeah, I would much rather play Penn State than those other teams that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it's a crazy. And for Texas, who I believe's got the second best draw, you play the 16th ranked team in the country in Clemson, then you go to play Arizona State, and then you're either going to be a beaten up, bruised Ohio State or Oregon, because that game's going to probably be an all-time classic going down to the wire, and Texas is just going to have basically a month off of college football. So based on the bracket I'm currently looking at, I'm loving a Georgia-Texas national championship game, a three-peat, Mark, to determine who wins it all based on how it's looking.
Yeah, well, I certainly made that comment yesterday that I thought that I was watching the national championship game at the SEC. I do think now that we're getting into this, and I know that really Oregon has done nothing to dissuade my confidence or anybody's else's. It's not like Oregon has looked vulnerable or that they've done anything but play really good football. But I just don't have as much confidence in Oregon as I do those two.
Well, it's not even about that. It's just they're going to have to play Ohio State most likely to get there. So, all their energy, resources, plays, and efforts will be drawn out in that game to win it. If you're Texas, you can save a lot of stuff until the semifinals, because I don't believe Clemson's going to be a real challenge. They struggled to beat South Carolina, and they got waxed by Georgia. And then Arizona State, I'm just not a believer in the Big 12. I know they looked great against Iowa State. In my opinion, that showed more about Iowa State than Arizona State. I don't believe anybody in the Big 12 is an elite college football team, especially not nearly on the caliber of Texas. So, yeah.
Well, I would say that Texas, based on what they've shown this year, and Arizona State in that championship game, yeah, Texas is clearly a better team. I got to think that they're going to be a 10 or 12-point favorite. But I would say that Arizona State on their best day, they could go into Austin and really put up a good fight on their best day.
Right. I don't think we're going to see a repeat performance at Iowa State. I think that was their best punch. I think if Texas plays a B game, they're going to win that game 100% of the time. I could be wrong, but the game will be played out on the football field. Mark, I was told by everybody who liked the 12-team playoff expansion we would get great first-round games, Mark. And to be honest, 3 of the 4 I'm seeing are going to be complete blowouts and complete duds. I don't see how Texas Clemson's going to be close. I don't see how Penn State SMU is going to be close, and I don't see how Notre Dame Indiana is going to be close. And I'm talking within 14 points when I say close.
Yeah. So you think Ohio State, Tennessee? Yeah, that should be a great game. It should be. I can see SMU giving Penn State a game. Who knows what the weather's going to be in Happy Valley on December?
Oh my gosh, we're going to the weather. Oh my goodness,
we're going to the weather. We're going to the weather. And Indiana, Notre Dame. I don't see Notre Dame blowing them out, but I think that they're a solid pick to win that game. They are probably, to me, the most assured winner in the first. It's close. It's close. I do have a high confidence rate with Penn State and with Texas. I would say Texas is my most assured first round winner, followed by Notre Dame, then Penn State, then whoever I pick in the other game.
Right. And then your second, even the second round games, Mark, I'm sorry, but Penn State, Boise State, blowout. Texas, Arizona State, blowout. Georgia, Notre Dame. Georgia probably is going to blow out Notre Dame. We could get 2 or 3. I mean, this bracket, the way it's just shaped, out of all the weeks, this is probably the worst bracket we have in terms of competitive matchups and balance.
You think Georgia's going to blow out Notre Dame?
I think they're going to control. I don't think it'll be like a complete 31-3 blowout, but I think Georgia's going to clearly show that they're the better football team. They're going to be up like 10, 14 points the whole game. Notre Dame may score a garbage time touchdown. Notre Dame hasn't beaten anyone worth anything all year, and they have by far the absolute worst loss. They've gotten fat on empty calories. Their best win is against what? Louisville?
Texas A&M.
Okay, an 8-4 Texas A&M team.
Yeah,
a team
their best win.
Yeah, maybe what, the 8th, 9th best team in the SEC? An average SEC team's their best win. And Georgia just won the conference where Notre Dame got their best win in.
So for you, is this a matter of better teams got left out, or there just aren't better teams and it should be a smaller field?
It's a combination of both, but mainly the first part. There's just not enough good teams. There's not enough high-quality teams for this to be selected. I know Reese Davis, I'm not sure if you heard his spiel in the during the rankings release, but he was like, we don't need to have seeding based on auto conference bid. And I think that would fix some of the issue, but you're still going to run into the fact that teams are going to get this is an inequitable bracket. You're not going to ever get rid of that. But this year is really bad, in my opinion.
Would you feel better if, and I'm guessing you're targeting Arizona State, Boise State, and Clemson, and SMU. You're targeting those 4 teams, most of all.
Yes.
If we replace those teams, you would replace them with who?
Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and you can keep Clemson.
Okay.
In my opinion, that would get you, if we're trying to get better games on the football field, those teams have proven more, in my opinion, throughout the course of the season. It's not just because they're SEC teams either. There will be years where USC, Michigan, and stuff should be in the field over an SMU and a Clemson and those type of teams as well. It just happened this year that the big brands and the high caliber talent teams in the Big Ten performed terribly compared to where they should be.
Yeah, well, I do agree with you that if we're just talking about competitive games and that's what we want, or competitive games with the best teams, I'd much rather, if I'm a football coach and a football team, face SMU or Boise State or Arizona State than face Ole Miss or South Carolina. Absolutely.
Right. And I don't understand why people are saying this is just SEC bias. Listen, I'm sorry, Georgia's path to get to the national championship game, their toughest team is Penn State. I didn't make that bracket. Have it with the committee, that be. But we're in a 12-team playoff, and Georgia is going to have to play, the 8th or 9th best team to get to the national championship game? I'm sorry, but in my opinion, that's a failure of the system. That shouldn't happen in a 12-team playoff. 12?
But I also don't want a situation where we're just having a bunch of people sit around a boardroom and pick brand names, even if they do believe they're the best football teams, and then we're isolating other conferences and not giving them a fair shot. Like, I don't want to live in a college football world like that.
Well, I hate what to tell you, but
I want to see it played out. I want to see this discrepancy played out. If we're sitting here in 5 years and the Big 12 is 0-6 because they actually got 2 teams in 1 year, 0-6 in playoff games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, ACC is 1-5 or whatever, then it should be addressed at that point. But I want to see it play out.
That's fine. And Mike Rotunda, Georgia isn't that good. I agree with you. Georgia is probably not the first or second best team in the country. That doesn't matter. As long as they play like the 5th best team in the country, they're in the national championship game. And that's all that matters. I can't believe what I'm seeing with some people. But Mark, I'll have people, I guess, call in and explain why I'm an SEC homer, why I'm wrong, and why Georgia isn't just penciled in or put in Sharpie at this point in the national championship game. But anyway, have a good day.
Thanks, Terrell. Appreciate it. So as long as Georgia and Texas don't have to meet, man, I think that there's a high likelihood that they're going to play for a third time for the national championship. All right, let's keep it rolling. We got our buddy Adam stopping by. Adam, how you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing great.
So I think the committee got it right. I think they used their common sense. But, and I only have one question for you. So you do recall, of course, when we had the 14 playoff, there was a huge debate about whether it should be TCU or Alabama. Then last year, there was a debate, should the number 4 seed be Florida State or Alabama? Well, lo and behold, we are now at 12 teams. And sure enough, the exact same thing happened. A debate between SMU and Alabama for the remaining seed. So what I told you when we had the 14 playoff was that there should be a playing game for the final spot. That would solve the problem because it's going to continue, and this is evidence, Exhibit A, that it will in fact continue no matter how many teams you have. So would you be willing to revisit my idea that let's have SMU and Alabama play each other, and then we will have our last seed and settle the debate so that it doesn't occur like it did in the 14 playoff or occur in the future in the 12-team playoff?
We unfortunately cannot assure that one of those 2 teams did not have to play a conference championship game. And we cannot assume going into the conference championship game how they will have performed. So this is what it came down to this year after Saturday's play. But if SMU had lost that game 49-0, I don't know that we would be sitting here discussing the qualifications of SMU versus Alabama, and then forcing that team to play a play-in game in addition to then getting into a 4-game stretch after that. I think it's just requiring way too much.
It may be requiring way too much, but that's the price that these teams on the bubble are going to have to play. Just like, in other college sports where in the finals you have to win 2 of 3 if you have 1 loss, for example, in a double elimination tournament. But this will settle the debate because 50% of people want SMU, 50% want Alabama, Florida State, Alabama, TCU. It's never going to stop. So I think that there should be The committee should have the discretion in appropriate years based on relevant exigencies to exercise that option to avoid what has happened today and what has happened in years past. Just my thought.
Is this something that would have been determined weeks ago that we would know is coming, or would the committee, in addition to unveiling these rankings, say we have a tie for the 11th position, and this being an odd year, Clemson is the 12, but they've got an automatic berth. SMU and Bama are tied for number 11. Therefore, they are going to have to play a game, and they're going to play it next Sunday.
Yes, because it will not only reduce the level of controversy and increase the credibility of the rankings, it will also avoid looking at all these contradictory data points that people cherry pick to support particular narratives, like strength of schedule, quality of wins, quality of losses, etc. Let's get out of the weeds and just say we'll settle it on the field. That would be my solution, and I would give them the equitable discretion to do so as the circumstances so warrant. So thanks for listening to my argument. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you being here.
Great.
I certainly would agree with Adam if we were playing video games, but I just don't think we can put these athletes through another week of play and surprise the coaches and the teams and the staffs with just, okay, fire up the stadium next Saturday and we're going to play a game. I just don't think that that's fair to them. If there was a more objective criteria where leading up to this decision, we could point to that and say it's leading up to this situation where A is going to have to play B as a winner take all play-in game, then people would be prepared for it. But if it just popped out of nowhere because the committee couldn't make a decision, I can't really get on board with that. For as much as fun as that would be, I would love to see Alabama and SMU play next Saturday. That would be great. But I don't have to prepare the team. I don't have to book travel arrangements. I don't have to coach the game. I don't have to fire up the stadium, all of those things. Would it be great fun? Would we all be watching Alabama and SMU play because half of us think that SMU should make it and half think Alabama should make it? Then we got the small little pocket over here that believes Ole Miss should make it. And what if they play the ugliest game known to man and a bunch of Ole Miss fans come out and say, see, we would have killed SMU. We wouldn't have beaten SMU 17-16. We would have killed SMU. So I guess it's got to stop somewhere. Somebody's got to make a decision at some point, and today is the day to make the decision, and the committee has. Michigan Man, what's going on today?
What's up, man? Isn't it crazy that Penn State ended up getting the easiest path?
They got the easiest path. They got SMU. Then they're going to play
in Boise State.
Boise State is the 3-6. Yeah, They got the first two are heavily in their favor. Yeah,
That's insane to me. I mean, look, they gotta figure something out with this seeding, because I don't know how the one seed ends up getting a harder path than the team they beat in the conference championship. That's just me, though.
Well,
I don't know how you
right.
feel.
They do have to play a first game, though, but you're right. And for Penn State, most people were looking at the 5 seed, as we have this entire offseason and before that, as being the prime position, which it is. But also they lucked into this whole thing that nobody saw coming, with a Mountain West Conference champion getting all the way up to a number 3 seed. And so Penn State falls into that. Yeah, it's beautiful for them. I personally, and this is clearly no bias on my part because the argument's easy to make, Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Penn State.
I get the argument for that, though. I mean, it makes sense. They beat Penn State, so you would think, but
way beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, you could say a bunch. There's a lot of things to go into for sure, but I guess they stay consistent with what they've been saying, is they're not going to penalize teams for losing in the conference championship. So,
So if Penn State would have lost 52-0, the committee can just simply ignore that. They can completely.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy.
So So this would be my first question if I was Reese Davis, based on that comment about the committee ignoring conference championship games. I would have said, did you guys watch the conference championship games last night? And of course, the response would be, even if they didn't, they would be embarrassed. So they would say, of course, yes, we watch all the conference championship. Then I would say, why? Why'd you watch the conference championship games? All you needed to have is somebody hand you a piece. You shouldn't even know the scores. They should just give you the results of winner, loser of each conference championship game, because you're not supposed to know who played well and who didn't.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think the team that got the hardest path is Ohio State. I mean, they're going to have to beat Tennessee, Oregon, and then probably Texas to make it to the national championship game.
Yes.
That's rough, man. At least if Penn State, like we were talking before, got the fifth seed, you probably feel pretty confident, and Ryan Day beating James Franklin at the end of that. Now he's got to beat Texas if he gets past the first two. I mean, that's tough sledding, man.
Oh man, the odds of them winning those three games in a row are minuscule.
And if they get to the national championship game, I'm assuming it's going to be Georgia. So they'd have to win the national championship, they're going to have to beat Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Georgia.
And they can't beat Michigan.
Well, that's the thing. The thing is funny about that's an outlier at this point to me, because he just coaches different against Michigan. We're going to see too. We're going to see how he coaches against Tennessee. And if he ends up coaching different, he's just clearly got a Michigan issue.
Yeah. Again, they could play great football, but man, they could be the second best team in the country. They could be the best team in the country. Who knows? And not be able to make it through that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's tough, man. We'll see what happens, though. All right, that's all I got, though, man. I mean, I don't really have any other reactions to it. I think the national championship game is going to be I agree with you. I think it's going to be Georgia, Texas.
I do too. That's what I'm looking at.
So, all right, man. Peace out.
Appreciate it. It's our guy, Michigan Man, checking in. We've got Dr. Buckeye Davis.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to start off with saying salute to the committee for putting in the right team. If they'd have put in Bama over SMU, I think people should have totally pitchforks, everything, torches, all of that. I think that would have been a complete joke. It would have been bad, Mark.
Bama's got a better resume than SMU.
Yeah, but the losses to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma are inexcusable.
But they've got a better resume. So me personally, I don't care, because it's a toss-up to me. You can make an argument either way. Well, what I would have had an issue with is the committee told us last week who they were going to select. There's no way that they could drop SMU from 8 all the way out of the bracket, losing on the last play of the game.
I agree with that. So you think that changes by the way that game went to? I mean, you just mentioned 52-0 in the Big Ten title game would have meant nothing. Do you think it would have meant something in the ACC title game had Clemson completely blown out SMU? Or do you think the fact that it took a 50-some yard field goal and it was close kind of also helped them SMU? Do you think that also played a part?
I think what the committee tells us and what they truly believe or know and execute are two entirely different things, and they continue to show us that every week. They told us that Penn State, or the loser of the Big Ten championship game and the SEC championship game, would not have those games held against them. And I don't know if that meant just because they're in the field regardless,
right?
But since SMU was hanging on the edge, that game was evaluated. They never really addressed that, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you cannot evaluate games that are being played among the best teams in the country.
Yeah, I mean, though, Mark, I get what you're saying with Alabama. I know what you're talking with resume. I just think, I mean, those Vanderbilt and Oklahoma losses are just not good. I think the Oklahoma loss was kind of the straw that broke the, for them. I mean,
SMU beat Duke in like 4 overtimes. That's their best win. Congratulations.
I hear you. And Alabama has the win over Georgia. I get all of that. But
Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, Missouri are all better wins than anything SMU has.
right. But I also think that there was a thing where maybe Alabama was a little bit on the decline by the end of the year, with that loss to Oklahoma too, and maybe not playing their best football.
Well, I've never heard the committee say that they take that into consideration. Maybe they do. I haven't listened to them since I've been doing this. I listen to them far less than I used to.
But I just think SMU deserves to be in.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I do too. I think they earned it. Absolutely. I think Alabama's better and they have a bit. Well, I don't know who's better. I don't know who a better team is. I think Alabama has a better resume, but SMU earned it on the field, getting to a conference championship game and playing down to the last second. And they had a great second half.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say too, Mark, just getting into the 5, 6, 7, 8 seeds here. Bottom line, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you about the title game. I do wonder if Penn State did get a little bit. I know you said maybe it wouldn't have mattered if it was 52-0. I do wonder if Penn State benefited from that game being as close as it was. I mean, maybe it kind of helped them a little bit that it was, a competitive football game, and that they could say, hey, our 2 losses were, 1 possession games to, the best team and, a top 10 team. So, but there's just not a lot of meat on Penn State's bone. I mean, if they're carrying with them Illinois as their best win of the year, listen, I kind of get, I just want to say from an Ohio State perspective, I kind of get it. And I want to say, I'm not going to try and sound like a homer here, because I think in a way, you want to, I maybe think the committee wants to punish Ohio State for what happened last week. And in some ways, rightfully so. I just want to say that, rightfully so. But what you just said a second ago, these 2 teams played, and Ohio State played them on their field and beat them by a touchdown in a game that we both agreed was maybe really even not that close.
Here are the 3 points of why Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Penn State. And this, whether anyone wants to believe this or not, I don't care, has nothing to do with my fandom. I would be making the same argument as I make arguments back and forth between all these teams, depending on however I see it. But number 1, you just made the first point. Ohio State wins on the road in Happy Valley by a touchdown. They have the clear yardage advantage by 110 to 50 yards, whatever it was, something in that range. They were going in for another touchdown, et cetera, et cetera. If you watch the game, Ohio State was decidedly the better team. Mm-hmm. Point number 2, Ohio State went to Autzen. They came within, whether you want to say it's a field goal, it's a second, it's yardage. They slide the ball and they call a timeout a second late, and they could kick the game-winning field goal at Oregon. What Penn State did last night was a competitive game. It was a nice game, but was Oregon ever really threatened in that game? No, it was constantly 21-10, 31-24. They were constantly a score to 2 scores, about 45-30.
I don't know, Mark. I didn't talk to you about that game afterwards. I actually thought Penn State had a real legit chance to go down and score. Aller had a fairly hot hand, and they were running the ball through their defense really well. They ran the ball down their throat.
Yeah. I mean, if doing more.
Right. If Koltanicki doesn't get a brain fart right there and run the ball on 2nd and 1, that drive would have continued. They had 2 timeouts with 2 minutes left. They could have done some business against that Oregon defense, which they were doing the entire night. But they were doing business. They didn't score 37 points by accident.
I understand that it was a competitive game, but Penn State never had the lead. They never tied. They never nothing. I was happy to see Penn State start a comeback, but I never thought Oregon's losing this game. I never felt like they were going to lose that game.
I guess I could say maybe because James Franklin's on the sideline. I always thought Penn State was going to lose if you want to throw that card into the middle of the table. But I thought when it was 31-24 after Penn State had weathered 28-10 and they got the ball to start the second half. And by the way, Warren comes up with that catch 90% of the time down the middle of the field. That could have been a different game. That game was I think it's more competitive than you're giving it credit for, Mark.
I think that if Ohio State's proximity to Oregon was a 9.5 out of 10, Penn State's was more like a 7.
Okay.
They,
Okay.
they were behind the whole game. They were usually behind by 2 scores. I just never thought that they were going to. I was hoping, I was actually rooting for Penn State, even though I picked Oregon to cover. And
Right.
thought that
Yeah.
was a rather
I should. I
easy
guess I
bet
should.
to make.
No, I took Oregon minus the 3.5. I shouldn't complain either. So
Yeah. So
I get your
just
point.
saying that I'm not discrediting Penn State's effort. It was a good football game. It was competitive. They played well, but they did not play as close to Oregon as Ohio State did by any stretch. That's not even debatable.
Yeah.
It's not even
No, I would
close.
agree with that.
And they also didn't go to Autzen Stadium to do it.
That's fair. That's
So
fair.
that's point number 2.
Okay.
Point number 3 is that Ohio State had to play the other best team in the conference, and they beat them by 23 points. And Penn State
Right.
doesn't have any win, anything close to that. Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Penn State. They just flat out have a better resume.
You know what? Somebody must be smiling on Franklin. You know what I mean? Seriously, they benefited. Really, Penn State benefited from a weak schedule this year, Mark. If you stop to break it down, because they didn't have to play the team up north, they didn't have to play Oregon, they didn't have to play Indiana. And although who knew Indiana was going to be Indiana, to be fair, but still, they didn't have to play them. You know. Really, nobody in non-conference that was great. Unless you want to say going to Morgantown, but yeah, I mean I agree. They have a great path to the semis. They have a really good path to the semis. Which I mean, you ask any Penn State fan, hey, if we can get to the semis, we never got to a 14 playoff before under Franklin. This is our best, path to a 14 playoff. So. I do want to say this. What did you feel about Notre Dame at the 7 and Texas at the 5, though? Or do you think that's right? Or because Texas doesn't really have much to show for their season, and we talked about Notre Dame's, lack of maybe some meat on the bone there too.
Well, I think Texas has a better resume than Notre Dame. I think that they should be the 5.
Okay.
I would go Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Tennessee.
The other factor here, Mark, is maybe the committee didn't come out and say this. I don't think they wanted to give Ohio State the 7 because obviously what they didn't want to see that Ohio State Indiana rematch is the big thing. Let's just say what it is. They had no appetite to see an Ohio. Now, I thought that there was a chance they could move Clemson to a 10 seed and maybe do a 7-10 Ohio State versus Clemson. Could have been plausible, although that's a playoff game. Maybe we've seen a few too many times. Who knows? But I don't know. But that would have been a plausible type situation. I mean, I get the fact that they want to give Ohio State a tough path. And if you say you want to punish them for what happened last week, I get it. And I'm not going to run away from that as being the fact that maybe they weighed into consideration. What do you think? Is that maybe kind of a way of saying it, that we're going to give you the toughest path based on what happened last week?
I hope that had nothing to do with it. If that had something to do with it, I think that is negligence, and you talk about a fireable offense. I think that they all should be dismissed of their duties if they're overtly punishing teams. It should just be another, that 7-5 Michigan loss should just be thrown right into the laundry with Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois, which is a much, 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 much worse loss, or Alabama losing to Oklahoma and Vandy, which are worse, slightly worse losses, and by 24-3, a much worse loss. So I hope it was just evaluated like everything else. I hope so, but they screwed up.
I think so. I mean, maybe from my own perspective, I'm kind of saying, in knowing the importance of the game, like I talked about with you last week, maybe they deserve this kind of punishment. I'm just, I got to be real with you. But then I think about it. Ohio State legitimately beat a top 5 or 6 team by a touchdown, and I think a fairly decisive win on their field, and then handled a top 10 team on their own field by basically 3 scores. So, I mean, you tell me how that, may not deserve a little bit better than what it's been given.
Yeah. Well, if we don't stop this discussion, David, I'm sure tons of people are going to call us
Okay.
whiny Ohio State fans, but it's obvious.
No, I agree.
Anybody with half a brain can digest what we are talking about. But that's fine. That's what they're going to have to do.
Mhm.
It's going to be the most difficult path to win a national championship ever.
Right.
Pretty much anybody who wins it, even Oregon with a bye, they have to beat Ohio State, Texas, Georgia in a row.
Yeah.
That would be the toughest path as well. So that's what this is for. Somebody's going to win the national championship. So they're going to have to get through a lot of good football teams. But if it's Penn State, they're going to have to get through slightly lesser football teams or significantly lesser football teams the first two times around. But I won't be surprised if Penn State loses one of those two games.
I got to say something too. Yeah, I agree. Although I think Penn State's path to the semis, they're never going to have a better path to the semis than they've got right now. I do want to say something about Texas, by the way. I think Texas, that Arizona State game, maybe I shouldn't buy that the Clemson game is going to be tricky for them. Although I don't know, I've not seen much of this Texas offense to me, and it's not just against Georgia, has been very inconsistent the entire year and has not looked nearly as explosive as I thought it would be with Ewers at quarterback. And although I think they should handle Clemson at home, they've got no reason not to handle Clemson fairly easily at home. But I do think the Arizona State game would be tricky. I could see that game being very, not just a lay down game for Texas.
I agree. If that Arizona State team that showed up at the Big 12 championship game, and they've given us indication, they just keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter and better. And Kenny Dillingham, he's going to go in there with no fear, and they're going to lay it all on the line, and they're going to feel no pressure, you would think. That, I think they can be dangerous.
And Arizona State can run the football so that, they have a legitimate chance.
We think they can.
Well,
can they play Texas?
Yeah, running against Texas's defense might be a different deal, right?
Iowa State was like 98th in the country going into that game against the run.
Yeah, Saban did a really good breakdown on College Game Day about how Iowa State has kind of been exposed against the run this year, yesterday on Game Day, pardon me. I will say, you're right. And first of all, I think in the first round, Ohio State drew as tough a matchup as they're going to get. I mean, the bottom line is I've seen better Ohio State offensive lines struggle against SEC defensive lines. I mean, Tennessee can run the football. I will say Tennessee's offense doesn't, if Ohio State can just contain the run, Nico in that passing game has not yet to impress me this entire year. But, I still think it's a passing team that threatens Ohio State's defense a little bit more than a running team does, in my view. But the defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line is the game right there.
Yeah, that's scary to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who wants Ryan Day out, they might as well not put up with 2 or 3 weeks of misery. Just have Tennessee win the game, and that might be the end.
Hey, Mark, remember 2000, how it ended for, lost at home, South Carolina in the bowl game to an SEC team?
Yeah. I remember it well.
I don't want to say deja vu. Well, I mean, listen, this team put themselves, I think, to a degree in their own position, and I'm not going to run away from that as a fan, like I said. But if you look strictly at the record and what they accomplished as far as wins goes, you can also make the case they deserve a lot better than this.
Oh, they do. They do.
But hey, they're at where they're at. All right, my friend, going to be an interesting week. You're going to do more breakdowns on these playoff games.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get after it.
Okay, plenty of Mark Rogers videos to come, ladies and gentlemen.
That's what we do.
Tune in, folks. All right.
Thanks, David.
Take care, Mark. Yep, bye-bye.
Our guy, David, checking in. All right, Adam, what you got for us? Adam says, Mark, if there is a play-in for the final seed, the winner of that game should get a first-round bye. This will avoid unfairly burdening the play-in team while resolving controversies regarding the final seed selection. So then you're going to dump a team that earned a bye? Okay. Will stopping by with his Notre Dame Fighting Irish with the 6th seed.
Mark, I was hoping, of course, that Ohio State would be ranked ahead of Penn State because Notre Dame was already ranked ahead of Ohio State, but it is what it is, I guess. I mean,
What,
people
for
are-
that to help Notre Dame?
so that they would dodge Georgia in the second round.
Oh, I got you.
But it is what it is. I think the Irish should get by Indiana. I mean, I think it'll be similar. I think Indiana will score some points because of Ben Morrison getting hurt, but we'll see. I think they should be able to run the ball at will against the Hoosiers. And I think
Yeah,
it'll
I'm
be
pretty confident. Notre
Yeah.
Dame's just a sturdier
confident.
team, stronger team, more depth, just a more talented team.
But that Georgia game is going to be, I think it'll be a one-score game. I'm not sure. I'm not that confident in my Irish winning, but I think it'll be a one-score game down to the wire at the end. Hopefully the Irish could pull that one out.
Oh, I think Notre Dame can beat Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can win that game. And the Indiana game, I'm not counting any of these games in the first round as gimmies. None of them. Not even Clemson and Texas. Not even who else do we have? Penn State and no, that's the second round game. Penn State, Boise State, Penn State, and my blanking here for a second. Penn State, who are they playing?
SMU, right?
SMU, yes, of course.
Mm-hmm. Did you look at the second round where the sites are, where the host sites are for the second round? Did you see that?
No.
We could see an old-fashioned Rose Bowl between Oregon and Ohio State. I'm sure you would like that, Mark, even though it's not the traditional format that the Rose Bowl is in. We could get that at least.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I could care less about where these playoff games are held now. They're not bowl games. They shouldn't even call them bowl games. That's the stupidest thing I've ever. That just annoys me beyond belief that they even call these playoff games bowl games. They're not bowl games. They're playoff games. So I don't care where they're played and what they call them. Nobody remembers 3 years later. Oh, that was in especially now that we've got 12 teams.
I really only remember the ones that are in the Rose Bowl. Those are the only ones I really remember.
And then we've got the glorious Notre Dame Alabama Rose Bowl game that was played in Dallas.
Oh god, yeah. Do you agree with Matthew, Mark, that one of them will be an upset? I have a feeling one of them might be an upset.
One of the first round games?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the odds tell us that it will probably give us an upset in the first weekend. So to me, I'm the most sure about, well, Ohio State and Tennessee. That to me is not an upset either way. I can't imagine that
Ohio State's a 7.5 point favorite.
7.5?
Mm-hmm.
Too high. 7.5. Well, there's your upset right there. But if Tennessee wins that game, I'm not considering that an upset. It's a Vegas upset, of course. But
I know they had that Citrus Bowl game. Is there any other times you remember them playing?
Nope. That is the only time they've ever played.
Hmm.
They played in the rain at the Citrus Bowl on New Year's Day, 1995, and I was severely upset.
Eddie George versus Peyton, right?
Yes, and Ohio State was driving for the winning score, and they completed a pass at about the 25-yard line. And as soon as the ball was caught, it was stripped out for a fumble that ended the game.
That Tennessee team was pretty close to Florida, right? That was a...
Oh, yeah, that was their only loss. They finished like number 3 in the country.
Yeah. But I just think Ohio State need to score first. They need to get the crowd into it and not have the crowd turn on them. And I think they can pull it out.
Yeah, well, hopefully the crowd won't turn on them. I never understood that at all myself.
Yeah.
Like if the crowd feels like they're booing a coach, the players don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're booing the team. That's a dumb thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm frustrated by the Penn State being ranked ahead, but I guess I don't know. Like what you just said in your conversation with David, I completely agree with. I don't know, man.
In terms of why Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Penn State.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even think it's that. It's the only argument that could go against it would be that Penn State advanced to the championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, that Ohio State lost to Michigan, so Penn State doesn't have a loss that bad. Well, the two teams played.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would love to sit down with the committee after these rankings and just hammer away at point after point after point.
Mm-hmm.
Would love to do that.
That would be. I mean, the committee should be questioned more by the fans too, but I don't know. We'll see. I do think that Arizona. I don't know. Who do you think has a better chance of winning their second round game, Mark? Boise State or Arizona State? I think Arizona State would have obviously they would have a chance. They wouldn't be favorites, but
I'm going with Boise State.
Boise State?
Slightly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to get too hyped up about Arizona State based on one game against Iowa State, but they did really look impressive. They looked so impressive. But once that game started to tilt that way, they had a series of, they had 3 consecutive turnovers on defense that opened the game up. And 2 of them were nice defensive plays to cause strips of the ball carrier. The other one was because Rocco Beck threw a ball off of his right tackle's helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just became a momentum game where they just took over and got those 3 possessions inside the 35 yard line.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that really bothered me about last night's games was the James Franklin going for 2 there. Like, you go for 2 at the end to win the game. You don't go for 2 that early.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why he did that.
Mm.
There was a situation like that, not as important a game, but Kansas State and Oklahoma State. And it's the first time I really remember, this was, I think, last season, that I heard people arguing the analytics. And the basic thought is that if you're down by 15, you score a touchdown, that if you get the 2-point conversion, obviously then you can just kick the extra point and tie the game and go to overtime. I'm trying to think. It was 45-30. No. They went for 2. What was the score?
In the game?
Because they kicked the extra point when it was 45-30 to make it 45-37.
I'll bring it in.
They went for 2 when they were down 38-24, scored a touchdown to make it 38-30.
It was 38-30.
Yes. So the analytics tell you that you go for 2 because if you get it, obviously then you can score the game-winning touchdown, just kick the extra point, number 1. If you don't get it, you're still within 8 to then go ahead and tie the game with a 2-point conversion. But you can win the game. Okay, here's the point. Basically, you can win the game on 2 possessions, as opposed to you need 3 possessions to win the game. You are doing nothing but guaranteeing that you can do no better than go to overtime. And then once you go to overtime, it's a 50-50 proposition. So basically, if I explained that, I know I explained it correctly, maybe not clearly, that you are taking the overtime off the table, fortunately, to your benefit, because the best you can do, if you kick the extra points, the best you can do is make it a 50-50 proposition in overtime.
Yeah. I mean, I still think you just.
That's the
I
best.
think the analytics. I think coaches should go with their gut and not
you
analytics.
can win the
more.
game in regulation versus the best you can possibly do, and that's if they don't score, is get it to overtime, and then you only have a 50-50 chance. So I get it analytically. I don't know if I would do it, if I would execute it that way.
I'll say one more thing about the Notre Dame situation. Like Matthew said, they aren't explosive. Like Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, they're explosive running backs. Yes, the pass game isn't explosive, but they're explosive on the ground. So I wouldn't call Notre Dame not an explosive team. To what Matthew's saying in the chat.
Man, nobody wants to tackle either one of those running backs.
But yeah, I mean, I wanted to play an SEC team in the first round, not Indiana. I'm kind of annoyed about that, but
why?
Because it would mean fans would have more respect for Notre Dame for beating an SEC team than just a Indiana that had a great season. Like I just
they're going to have to beat one anyway.
I know, but like I just don't want. I'm just sick of the disrespect from SEC fans like the real MVP. I just want them to.
You really shouldn't be concerned with what people.
I know say. I shouldn't get annoyed, but I do get annoyed by him.
Because when we had the conversation just a few minutes ago about Ohio State versus Penn State, I know that there's going to be all sorts of people that are going to think that I made that argument for a certain reason because that's who I root for, but really has nothing to do with it. I think it's a pretty clear argument, but I will just say what I believe and how I see things regardless. And you're going to have to beat an SEC. Why wouldn't you want the easiest possible game? Every team should want, for obvious reasons, should want the easiest possible game. But especially in this scenario, because everybody's going to have to get through somebody eventually. Even Penn State, they could win 2 fairly easy games, but then they're going to have to play Texas most likely in the semifinals.
All right, Mark.
How much credit is Penn, other than being on the radar with everyone for a few weeks because they're winning games, in the aftermath of it, if Penn State beats SMU by 10 points and they beat Boise State by 10 points, and then they get drubbed by Texas by 3 touchdowns, is anyone going to look back on that as being the successful run by Penn State?
No.
I don't think so. I'm not going to consider that. I'm going to consider that they beat 2 decent football teams. I don't think any of these wins are easy. Everybody's good to a degree. Those are nice wins. Shoot, those are probably the 2 best wins they'll have all season. Their best win's Illinois right now.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we'll see how this all plays out. Excited for it. It turns out Notre Dame's the only game on Friday. I thought they might split it, but I guess they're not going to split it. So they'll have 1 game on Friday, 3 on Saturday.
Yep.
So we'll see.
It should be good.
All right. Appreciate it, Mark.
You will. Thanks for the call. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We'll take a call coming in from our buddy Jackson. Jackson, what's going on?
How you doing today, Mark?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Unfortunately, we screwed ourselves with that 24-3 loss against Oklahoma. Like, why we let ourselves get bad like that, I don't know. But the moment I knew when SMU was in was when we heard Sean McDonough at the final seconds of the game when SMU, before they kicked their extra point, he was like, I've seen enough. I mean, they should be in the playoffs. Like, you knew SMU did enough to impress the committee. Well, the committee paid enough attention. And we heard Dabo Swinney, I remember last night, where he was saying SMU should be in. I thought to myself, I would not be surprised if SMU is in because of the push.
Yeah, well, again, the committee will decide whatever it will and then justify it later. But as soon as SMU was ranked to number 8 in the country, I knew that they were going to make the playoff regardless of what happened, as long as they kept it pretty respectable.
Yeah, and I think also like the committee, they had enough of the little storm that they had from the ACC last year after that whole Florida State fiasco. They thought themselves, we're not going to have this again. I was like fairly certain for a little bit that SMU would get screwed over, but then the moment they were making that comeback against Clemson and did just enough getting, I'm like, yeah, they're in.
Yeah, and they earned it. I have no issue with it, even though Bama's got a better resume. I have no issue with SMU being selected.
Now I'm wondering who will be playing in some of the bowl games. Like, I don't know which bowl will be. We'll probably be in like the Citrus Bowl, but the fun part is who will be playing. Like, I've been talking with some people. It's like, oh, we could see Alabama play Illinois, and it's like, oh, that's a good one. I mean, it sounds pretty fun. Well, if it's not fun, we'll make it fun.
Yeah, I love the bowl games. I don't like that people no longer are really looking at the bowl games, but yeah, I'll be interested to see who gets paired in these bowl games, and I'll be watching.
Oh yeah, we'll always be watching. Arizona State, it's going to be fun to see who they play between the winner of Texas Clemson, but that Texas Clemson game looks pretty fun. Notre Dame, Indiana, the thing that I'm thinking about from that matchup is, can Notre Dame win their first big postseason game since the 1993 season? Because that's the question of the century for the Fighting Irish.
Yes.
Because I mean, if Marcus Freeman could do what Brian Kelly couldn't do, he's really going to win over a lot of people. Like, we think people forgot about that Northern Illinois loss. They're really going to forget about it. They're going to remember more of the good that Marcus Freeman is doing than the one bad day he had.
Yeah, as long as Notre Dame fans are understanding that Brian Kelly did not get to participate in a 12-team playoff and face Indiana.
That's true. That is true. But have you been feeling about Boise State this season?
Well, I don't think that Boise State's going to be highly competitive in these games myself. Penn State doesn't tend to explode on and blow teams out, so I don't know that it's going to be any kind of annihilation, but Boise State's just doing enough against Mountain West Conference teams to win games. You know, the back half of the year, they really haven't generated that much offense, and they didn't score in the second half of their game against UNLV. But they're a good team, solid team, and obviously Ashton Genty's really good, and Matson at quarterback is a decent player as well, and they're extremely well coached. And I don't think Penn State's going to embarrass them in any such way, but Boise State shouldn't win a game. But yeah, I think Penn State's going to be too much for them, but not by a whole lot.
I've been thinking about the coaching profile of Spencer Danielson, and maybe it's just me, but I kind of feel like he's a Chris Peterson 2.0, especially under the circumstances when he came in as the interim coach last year. You know, they were 5-5. They went out the rest of the regular season, come out of nowhere. They do just enough getting the Mount West title game. They win the title game. Then in 2024, they have a humongous season. Like, so far, his coaching record is 15-2. That's pretty high.
Yeah, he's doing a heck of a job, and really, Boise State. It's fun in that college football fans that love the sport should embrace this Boise State situation. But because here's a program that put themselves on the map, that determined to build a great football program. And they did that, of course, at the Division II level at the time, the FCS level. And they worked themselves up into the Group of Five status and became the poster child for the Power Five upset and the great Group of Five program. They've got, I believe, the second or third best winning percentage this century in college football, and have had a remarkable program history in the last 25 years with the likes of Dan Hawkins and Houston Nutt and, of course, Chris Peterson. And it's just remarkable. And I think that this is kind of a program achievement for Boise State. Regardless of what happens, I like seeing them in the playoff, and that their rise to fame and their rise to prominence and being disrespected for all those years and just fighting the uphill battle is finally rewarded, and they get to play a playoff game and show whether they belong. Now, this may not be the best year for them to be in the playoffs. Some of those other teams would have probably fared a little bit better, like in 2006 and so forth, but they finally arrived, and I think this is good for college football to see teams like Boise State get a chance.
I hate that we're not going to see a Smurf Turf playoff game, but hey, on the bright side, they get a first round bye. So, I mean, that's something.
They do.
Yep.
All right, Jackson.
Here we go. Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's going to be a wild ride tonight and tomorrow for sure.
All right, man. Good to see you.
There we go.
All right. We appreciate Jackson stopping by as always, and all of you here at the Voice of College Football. And so, without further ado, nobody else is left on the line. So we do appreciate you being here, and this is what we do each and every year. We've done this for how long? Man, I don't know that we did this going back to 2014. Maybe not. But soon thereafter. So it's an annual tradition here at the Voice of College Football to get together for the big watch party. And now it's time to get to work and size up these teams and these matchups. And what I really want to do are historical videos on these bowl matchups and these teams and their series history. But people don't tend to necessarily gravitate to those videos. So maybe I'll throw one or two of those out and see how they do. Yeah, this is the culmination, folks. This is what it's all about. We get to rankings Sunday and find out who's in. And really, when you come down to it, the controversy was pretty limited this year. I would expect more in future years and more debates and more dilemma and more of a glut of teams sandwiched around that 12 spot. But the committee got off fairly easy this year. Pretty clear decision in regards to what they had set up for us with SMU at number 8. And again, just the oddity of Boise State earning a 3 seed is crazy as a Mountain West Conference champion. They bypass all those heavyweights, Ohio State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, all of them for the 3 seed and the home playoff or the bye in the first round. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Keep it locked in here. Please like the video on the way out, and we appreciate your support. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. When you shop for Christmas and shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide, and we will see you next time. The College Football After Dark show is tonight. So here's the deal with the College Football After Dark show. People ask this all the time. I get this comment all the time on our Sunday night College Football After Dark show. People are like, why are those guys on your channel? What are those guys doing? Do they belong on your channel? How did they get to be on your channel? They got to be on that show. So your pass onto that show as a panelist on that show is easy. Become a channel member here at YouTube, and you can jump on the line with everybody else. You can jump on the line with everybody else if you are a member here at the Voice of College Football. And I'll actually take the link from the show, and I'm going to send it to all the members as soon as I get off here. I'm going to send that link to all the members here on YouTube. And you also get my predictions throughout the bowl season and the postseason with the playoffs coming up. And I've been pretty hot here in the last 3 weeks after suffering a down season, but hot the last 3 weekends. So that should continue. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. Catch our College Football After Dark show coming up tonight at 10:30 Eastern. And then on Monday night, Matt Zemek and I for the Big Ten Live show. The Big Ten Live show, Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern time. See you then.